How does the most famous child star on Earth vanish only to reappear decades later to applause instead of pity? In the early 1992nd, Macaulay Culkin's face wasn't just on posters, it was a global passport to laughter. A single wide-eyed, "Ah!" turned a modest holiday comedy into a record-smashing phenomenon, and a 10-year-old into a household name from Chicago to Tokyo. Yet fame that erupts overnight rarely lands gently. Within a few years, the camera that once adored him became a spotlight on everything else. Whispered stories about a domineering stage father, a courtroom struggle over who controlled the fortune of a minor, headlines that treated childhood like a commodity. The numbers were staggering, but the images were louder. Red carpets replaced by courthouse corridors, paparazzi photos replacing movie stills. By his mid-teens, Culkin stepped away, and for much of the 2002nd, he existed as a rumor more than a performer, reduced in the public imagination to a mugshot, a gaunt tabloid snapshot, a punchline about what fame does to kids. Then the narrative bent. He re-entered on his own terms, first in small, self-aware projects, then with a sly, scene-stealing turn on American Horror Story 2021, and finally with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame 2023, that didn't celebrate a child so much as a survivor. This isn't a tale of luck. It's a chain of causes and consequences. A role that detonated into megastardom, a family battle that exposed the price of that detonation, a long retreat, and a deliberate adult return. What really happened inside the space between the scream and the silence? Which choices were his walk away, keep his money safe, refuse the circus, and which were made for him by parents, studios, and a culture that can't resist turning prodigies into parables? Before we dive into the full story, subscribe to Hollywood Exposed and turn on notifications so you won't miss this journey from myth to truth and the next chapters we're uncovering. Now, who is Macaulay Culkin when we strip away the punchlines and follow the facts? Macaulay Culkin is not just another Hollywood child actor. He is the child actor against whom nearly every other story of overnight fame is measured. Born in New York City in 1980, Culkin was one of 7 children in a family that often struggled financially. His father, Kit Culkin, a former stage actor, pushed his children into the performing arts, and by the late 1982nd, Macaulay was appearing in television movies and small film roles. Even at this early stage, directors noticed something: a natural timing, a way of making a line land as both innocent and sharp, playful and poignant. What makes his story worth telling today is not simply that he was famous, it's how famous he became, and how quickly. With Home Alone in 1990, Culkin catapulted from supporting parts to the center of one of the most successful family films in history. The movie earned nearly $500 million worldwide, and Culkin's face screaming in mock terror with hands on his cheeks became one of the most recognizable images of the decade. He wasn't just acting in a film. He was anchoring a cultural phenomenon. But Home Alone was not the only marker of his early years. Films like My Girl, 1991, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, 1992, and Richie Rich, 1994, cemented him as Hollywood's highest-paid child actor, reportedly earning contracts worth millions per picture. At the height of his fame, Culkin was not just a performer, he was a brand, a shorthand for holiday cheer and childhood rebellion. Yet the very intensity of this rise set the stage for what followed. Fame at such a scale, paired with family conflicts over money and control, created a storm that would eventually drive him away from Hollywood altogether. His story is not just about what it means to be famous young, but about what happens when the machinery of stardom treats childhood as expendable. To see how Macaulay Culkin became both a household name and a symbol of child star burnout, we need to revisit the first steps of his climb. The rise to fame that began with A Boy from New York and a Christmas comedy that conquered the world. Macaulay Culkin's rise was swift, dazzling, and nearly without precedent. By the time he was 10, he had gone from background roles to carrying one of the most profitable films of all time. But the seeds of that success were planted years earlier, in small theaters and bit parts that revealed his instinct for performance. In 1989, Culkin appeared in John Hughes's Uncle Buck alongside John Candy. The role was minor, but it showcased his gift for deadpan timing and quick wit. Hughes, already known for shaping teen classics, took note. When he later wrote Home Alone, he had Culkin in mind. That decision changed the trajectory of both their lives. Released in late 1990, Home Alone was designed as a modest holiday comedy. Instead, it became a juggernaut. Audiences fell instantly for Kevin McCallister, the mischievous yet vulnerable boy who defends his home from bumbling burglars. Culkin's performance carried the film. It wasn't simply cute. It was sharp, balancing slapstick with genuine emotional beats. His famous scream, hands pressed to his cheeks, wasn't just a gag. It became an emblem of childhood itself. Instantly imitated, endlessly replayed. The numbers were staggering. Nearly $500 million worldwide box office, making Home Alone the highest grossing live-action comedy for decades. Almost overnight, Macaulay Culkin was no longer just a child actor. He was the child star of the era. Hollywood moved quickly to capitalize. In 1991, he starred in My Girl, where his portrayal of Thomas J. Sennett, whose tragic death left audiences in tears, proved that Culkin could move beyond comedy into heartfelt drama. That same year, he hosted Saturday Night Live, one of the youngest ever to do so, further cementing his cultural presence. The following years brought a stream of high-profile roles. Home Alone 2. Lost in New York, 1992, which repeated the magic of the original. The Good Son, 1993, where he stunned audiences by playing against type as a chillingly sociopathic child. Richie Rich, 1994, where he embodied the comic book billionaire kid. At his peak, Culkin was the highest-paid child actor in history, commanding up to $8 million per film. But behind the box office success lay a growing pressure. Culkin was working relentlessly, film after film, with little of the ordinary childhood his characters embodied. Studios saw him as a guaranteed profit machine. His father, Kit Culkin, was notoriously controlling, often clashing with producers and pushing Macaulay harder. Fame had turned a family into a business and a boy into an empire. By the mid-1992nd, Macaulay Culkin had achieved what few ever dream of. He was a global icon before he was old enough to drive. Yet the pace was unsustainable, and the cracks were already showing. Fame that comes too fast rarely leaves quietly. The next phase of his story would reveal that behind the Christmas cheer and box office records lay conflicts and struggles that no child should have to face. At the height of his fame, Macaulay Culkin was more than a movie star. He was a cultural phenomenon. Between 1990 and 1994, he appeared in a string of films that not only showcased his range, but also solidified him as the highest-paid child actor in Hollywood history. What made this period remarkable was not just the financial figures or box office receipts, but the sheer dominance of a boy barely in his teens over the entire Hollywood landscape. After Home Alone turned him into a global icon, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, 1992, proved the success was no fluke. The sequel followed Kevin McCallister's misadventures in Manhattan, pitting him once again against the hapless burglars Harry and Marv. While critics debated whether the film matched the freshness of the original, audiences spoke louder. It grossed over $350 million worldwide. By the end of that holiday season, Culkin had become synonymous with Christmas itself. But Culkin wasn't content to play the same wide-eyed innocent over and over. His role in My Girl, 1991, revealed a different side. Thomas J., the sweet, allergy-ridden boy whose sudden death shocked viewers. The performance was tender, understated, and heartbreaking, proving he could carry emotional weight well beyond his years. The film became a cultural touchstone, remembered as much for Culkin's quiet sincerity as for its tragic ending. Then came a daring departure, The Good Son, 1993. Here, Culkin played Henry, a sociopathic child who manipulates and terrorizes those around him. Audiences accustomed to the lovable Kevin McCallister were stunned to see him embody cruelty with chilling conviction. The film polarized critics but demonstrated that Culkin was capable of more than just slapstick comedy. He could tap into darkness when required. Other films followed. The Nutcracker, 1993, which capitalized on his youthful charm, and Richie Rich, 1994, where he portrayed the world's wealthiest kid. Although these later projects didn't capture the magic of Home Alone, they kept Culkin firmly in the public eye and ensured he remained one of the most bankable names in Hollywood. At his peak, he was earning up to $8 million per film, an astronomical figure for a child actor, rivaling the salaries of adult A-listers. Behind the screen, however, The machine that built his career was grinding him down. His father, Kit Culkin, became infamous in Hollywood for being domineering and difficult to work with, often demanding higher pay and more control. Reports circulated of heated arguments with studio executives and directors, painting a picture of a family where professional ambition overshadowed parental care. By 1994, the strain was showing. After Richie Rich, Culkin stepped away from acting altogether. Officially, it was said he wanted a normal childhood, but insiders pointed to exhaustion, family battles, and a growing desire to escape the suffocating control of his father. At only 14 years old, Macaulay Culkin had reached the pinnacle of Hollywood stardom, and then walked away. This period remains the defining chapter of his career. The meteoric ascent, the unforgettable roles, and the decision to retreat while still at the top. For audiences, Culkin was forever frozen as Kevin McCallister, the boy who outsmarted burglars with paint cans and toy cars. For Culkin himself, the story was more complicated. The fame that had given him everything had also taken too much. The next act would not be about roles or box office numbers, but about survival. Battles with family, legal struggles, and a young man's attempt to reclaim his own life. When Macaulay Culkin stepped away from Hollywood in 1994, the decision looked like a retreat from glamour. In truth, it was an escape from a storm already raging behind the scenes. For years, Culkin had lived under the heavy hand of his father, Kit Culkin, whose reputation as controlling and combative became notorious in Hollywood. Kit wasn't just a manager. He treated his son's career like a personal empire. Studios dreaded negotiations. Co-stars described tension. And Macaulay himself later revealed that much of his childhood felt like a business transaction rather than a life. By his early teens, Culkin was embroiled in one of the most bitter family disputes in celebrity history. When his parents separated, a legal battle erupted over control of his fortune, estimated at around $17 million at the time. To protect himself, Culkin took the extraordinary step of legally removing both parents as custodians of his money. He placed the assets under the care of an accountant, essentially emancipating his finances before he was old enough to drive. For fans, it was a shocking revelation. Behind the smiling face on movie posters was a child navigating courtroom drama that most adults would struggle to endure. The years that followed were marked by withdrawal. Culkin largely disappeared from the screen, making rare appearances in small projects. His personal life, however, kept him in the tabloids. His close friendship with Michael Jackson drew intense scrutiny, particularly during Jackson's legal battles. Culkin consistently defended Jackson, even testifying in court, but the association fed relentless speculation. By the early 2000s, Culkin's life appeared adrift. In 2004, he was arrested in Oklahoma for possession of marijuana and 2 controlled substances without a prescription. Mugshots of a gaunt, weary-looking Culkin spread across the media, fueling narratives of another child star undone by fame. Paparazzi photographs in subsequent years, showing him looking frail and disheveled, only reinforced the idea that the once-beloved Kevin McCallister had become a cautionary tale. The tabloids thrived on this downfall narrative. "What happened to Macaulay Culkin?" became a recurring headline. Each candid photo was dissected as evidence of decline. Few asked whether his withdrawal from Hollywood might have been a deliberate act of self-preservation. Instead, the public image solidified. Culkin was a lost child star. A punchline about the dangers of too much fame, too soon. And yet, beneath the headlines, Culkin was quietly working to carve a life on his own terms. He explored writing, made cameos in indie films, and pursued eccentric creative projects. In 2013, he founded a parody band called the Pizza Underground, which performed Velvet Underground songs with pizza-themed lyrics. While critics mocked the project, Culkin seemed content, smiling, playful, in control of his own absurd narrative. It was a reminder that his story was not as simple as the fall from grace the tabloids preferred. Still, for much of the 2000 and early 2010, the prevailing image of Macaulay Culkin was one of struggle. His absence from mainstream Hollywood, combined with the spectacle of his legal battles, arrests, and public appearances, defined him less as an actor and more as a symbol of child stardom gone wrong. The narrative was powerful, but incomplete. Because what seemed like an ending was, in fact, only a pause. The next chapter would reveal a different Culkin, older, wiser, and ready to reclaim his story. For more than a decade, Macaulay Culkin lived as a ghost of Hollywood's past. Remembered for his childhood triumphs, gossiped about for his struggles, but rarely seen on screen. Then, almost imperceptibly, the tide began to shift. The same public that once consumed his downfall began to rediscover something else: resilience, humor, and an artist quietly reshaping his own identity. In the late 2010s, Culkin began reappearing this time, not as a troubled headline, but as a self-aware performer. His cameos in web sketches and indie projects leaned into the very myth that had haunted him. He poked fun at Kevin McCallister in viral parodies, showing audiences he could laugh at his past rather than run from it. The move worked. Instead of pity, people responded with affection. Suddenly, Culkin wasn't just a child star frozen in the 92nd, he was a man in his late 32nd taking control of the narrative. Then came a more substantial return. In 2021, Culkin joined the cast of American Horror Story, double feature. His performance as Mickey, a drug-addicted hustler with surprising depth, won praise from both fans and critics. It was not the wide-eyed innocence of Kevin McCallister, nor the tragic sweetness of My Girl. It was something darker, funnier, and undeniably adult. Audiences saw a performer who had not lost his instinct for timing, but had layered it with years of lived experience. Beyond the screen, Culkin embraced a new role: partner, father, and public figure on his own terms. His relationship with actress Brenda Song and the birth of their son Dakota in 2021 marked a new chapter defined not by tabloids, but by family. Interviews in this period revealed a calmer, more grounded Culkin, someone no longer chasing Hollywood but willing to step back into it on his own conditions. The crowning moment came in December 2023, when Culkin was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Standing alongside Brenda Song, their children, and former co-star Catherine O'Hara, Culkin delivered an emotional speech, thanking the people who had stood by him. For fans who had grown up with him, it was a moment of catharsis. The boy who had once been consumed by fame was now being celebrated as a survivor of it. Macaulay Culkin's legacy is complex. He is Kevin McCallister, forever immortalized in holiday reruns. He is also the teenager who fought for control of his own life, the young man hounded by scandal, and the adult who reclaimed his narrative. His comeback is not about box office domination, it is about endurance, the ability to withstand fame's harshest spotlight and still stand tall. So the question remains, will history remember him only as the boy left home alone, or as the man who proved that even the most fragile child star can write his own second act?